Story 1. My worst motel experience ever. Last year, my best friend Ally and I went on this great American road trip, trying to ski in as many states as possible in the month we had taken off from work. We did a lot of skiing, a lot of driving, and a lot of sleeping on various couches, truck stops, and of course, in motels. Most motels were fine. Some had great free breakfasts, some had dirty hot tubs that left us scrubbing ourselves in the shower and joking about getting pregnant from the water, some had weird stains we tried not to think about, some were spotless but cold, a few were amazing. Only one was terrifying. We stopped at the motel around 10:30 after a long day of skiing followed by a good 6 hours of driving. We were tired and sore and ready for bed. We had made some wrong turns, and were not exactly sure where we were. We didn't want to use data on our Canadian phones, so we were navigating old school with a map. It was mildly unsuccessful, but we were pretty sure we had a few more hours of driving until the next town, and we were not looking forward to it. So when we saw the glorious neon sign that blinked motel and vacancy at us, we didn't need to say anything. We both knew that was where we were staying for the night. As we pulled up in front of the office, I noted that we were the only people staying there. I told myself that it wasn't creepy, we were stopping close to a summer tourist spot midwinter, of course there would be an excess of rooms. In fact, we should consider ourselves lucky that they were open at all. It was definitely not creepy. We entered the office, and a shrill little bell announced our entry to the world. We waited for someone to come to the front desk. Then we waited a bit longer. We shared looks with lifted eyebrows, and tapped our fingers impatiently on the desk. "Hello?" Ally called out in the silence. "Somebody here?" We waited a few more minutes, then the door behind the counter slowly opened. An old man poked his head out, spotted us, and his face split into a wide grin. "Guests," he said. "You know, I thought I heard something, but I told myself it was just my imagination. Just my imagination. We don't get a lot of visitors around this time. And two beautiful young ladies too. Ah. I'm sorry I kept you waiting. I just couldn't believe that I had such luck. Welcome, 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 welcome." He was certainly an odd duck, but I used to work long, lonely night shifts. I know how excited you get when something happens. "So, travel-weary strangers, can I offer you a bed to rest your head?" He smiled. "Yeah, how much is a double room?" He looked at us, grin not wavering. $1.99 for 2 beds, $79 for 1 bed. I was ready to splurge for the 2 beds. Ally moved a lot in her sleep, and hogged the covers. Last night she had kept waking me up. "Let's do 2 beds." I looked at her pleadingly. She gave me a quick look filled with annoyance. I looked back at the man. His grin had faded. He looked as annoyed as Ally for a moment. When he noticed me looking at him, his grin snapped back into place. "Ah, actually, it seems we only have the 1 bedrooms ready. I'm so sorry." "Wait, what?" I couldn't help but burst out. "There are like no people here." "Oh, yes, that is the problem, isn't it? Sometimes we don't keep all the rooms prepped in winter. Saves costs, you know." I considered that. It didn't make sense at all, but I was too tired to argue. "You know what, for such pretty ladies, I give you a discount. How about $69 for the 1 bedroom? We'll take it." Ally responded before I had time to think. "Thank you. We can pay by card, right?" "Ah, no, I'm afraid not. We don't, well, we never got around to that modern stuff. Gotta stay off the grid, right?" "Ha." He laughed at his own joke. I shuddered involuntarily. We had cash. It was fine. He was creepy, but we were tired. We paid, got the keys, and drove up and parked in front of the room. I grabbed my stuff from the car, unlocked the door, and surveyed the room. It looked clean enough, the bed was big, and I was tired as hell. "Hey, I'm gonna go for a little walk, actually. My legs are so stiff," Ally said from behind me. "Wanna come?" I eyed the bed. It looked too comfortable. Ally had a good point, but that bed was speaking to me. Nah, I'll just shower and crash. Okay, cool. I won't be very long. She turned and left. I slammed the door shut behind me and stripped out of my clothes as fast as I could. I jumped in the shower, and the luxurious feeling of hot water run down my body. I had to force myself to get out. I went into the room, put on my PJs, and laid down on the bed. Ally wasn't back yet, but her nighttime strolls sometimes lasted as long as an hour, even when she was this tired. She had a hard time falling asleep, and those walks apparently helped. I got my phone out and tried connecting to the Wi-Fi. It didn't work. I immediately got annoyed. Not because I really needed the Wi-Fi, but because I had paid for it, and I wanted it. So I just laid there, getting annoyed, glaring at the ceiling fan. It was a weird model, something black sticking out from the bottom. I had never seen that before. I wondered idly what it did. Then I thought about how we were the only people staying here, how Ally was walking somewhere alone in the dark, how I didn't know where she was, how creepy that guy had been when he laughed at his joke about staying off the grid. Then the familiar feeling of fear started creeping into my guts. I knew where my mind was going. I have an overactive imagination. I tend to turn every situation into a horror movie in my head. It's a real problem in my dating life. I think most guys are serial killers. Ally always makes fun of me for it. I thought about how the guy had offered us 2 beds, and then refused to give it to us. Did he want us in this room specifically? Why? He probably had some creepy fantasy of 2 young girls sharing a bed. Ugh. I shook my head, trying to stop my mind from spinning out of control. I go of the bed, and went over to the huge mirror on the wall. I got my hair out of the towel and started brushing it. I couldn't quite get rid of the uneasy feeling at the pit of my stomach. I knew I wouldn't sleep well that night. For some reason, I thought of the one-way mirror scene in Cabin in the Woods. God, why do I watch horror movies? They always come back to me at the worst times. So creepy. I vaguely recall that there's a way to check if it's a real mirror. What was it again? You touch the mirror, and if there's no gap between your finger and the mirror finger, it's fake. I touched the mirror. There was no gap. I could see my eyes widening in fear in the mirror. No, wait, that can't be it. I tried to reason with myself. That's ridiculous. This is fine. We're fine. It's gotta be the other way around. But maybe. I realized I could check the bathroom mirror. It was one of those medicine cabinet mirrors. That one was clearly real. I walked slowly into the bathroom. Please be the same, please be the same, please be the same, I muttered. I wiped the fogged mirror, took a breath, and slowly pressed my index finger against the surface. Ice filled my veins. A gap. I took a deep breath, trying to clear my mind. We needed to get out of there. Where was Ally? I felt panic bubbling. I needed to get out of there. Okay. But play it cool. They could be watching. Who the hell are they? I can't let them know I know. I have to get out of here. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. I kept trying to come up with a plan, with something, but my mind was drowned in adrenaline. Finally, I heard steps outside. Ally was back. I got up, standing right next to the door. She put the key in the lock, turned it, and it opened. Ally, get in the car right now, I said as I pushed her out of the room. What? Why? Fucking camera in the room, I hissed as I pushed her back. Her eyes went wide, and she immediately obliged. I unlocked the car, threw my bag in the back, and we both jumped in. The door to the adjacent room burst open, and the old man came running out. He slammed his hands on the hood, as if to try to hold us back with his bare hands. We both screamed as I skidded out of there. Even in my panic, I could see several shapes behind him, in the room. He had not been alone. I just kept driving, praying that they weren't following us. We have to call the police, Ally said after an hour of driving. We have to. I nodded. She used her precious data to find the number of the local sheriff's office and called them up. Only heard half the conversation. Hey, I want to report an almost crime. I'm sorry. I'm not quite sure what. No sir, it's not a joke. We were staying at this motel, and there was a camera. In one of those one-way mirrors. I interjected. What? She turned to me. Yeah, tell him. In a one-way mirror. And the door didn't unlock from the inside. She said, looking to me for confirmation. I nodded. And there were people in the room behind that mirror, too. Her eyes went wide in fear as she repeated the information. Then she described the location of the motel. Yes. No. She sounded uncertain. We've been skiing. She frowned. Yeah? No, that's fine, we'd rather not. I looked at her quizzically. No really, we're already out of state. We just wanted to let you know. She abruptly hung up. What was that? I don't know, he wanted us to come back and give a statement. Shouldn't we? She didn't say anything for a little while. I don't know, I got a really bad vibe. Let's not, please. In small-town American sheriff's office? That's like totally how you die in the horror movies. We're not in a horror movie though. Aren't we? I shrugged. I wasn't really stoked on the idea of going back either. Frankly, I was still worried that they were following us. I really didn't want to get pushed off the road by some psycho hillbilly motel manager. And we had told the police we had done our part. Or so I thought. But yesterday, there was a story in the news about 3 young girls going missing. They were road tripping. In that area. Never made it back to Seattle. I can't help but wonder if they stopped at that same motel. I can't help but wonder what would have happened if Ally didn't take that walk. If we both got locked in that room. What the people in the other room expected. What they were gonna do. If they'd just watch, if Ally and I could have been that missing person story. Story 2. We've all seen that dilapidated roadside motel that's located in the middle of nowhere. You've probably driven past one and said to yourself fuck that and kept on driving, or wondered to yourself what type of person would stay there. This is about one of those times I didn't say fuck that and I stopped to rent a room for a night. It was a stormy night. The rain was pouring outside, lightning flashed frequently, and there were loud booms of thunder that sounded like the sky was exploding. It was late. I had been driving for 16 straight hours already, and I was exhausted. Plus, it was hard to see through the torrential downpour outside. I needed some rest. I almost convinced myself to keep going since I was only 8 hours from my apartment. I wish I would have listened to myself and kept going and never stopped. As I started dozing, a flashing neon sign that read motel in big letters was visible despite the rain. It caught my attention. I forced my eyes to stay open and I parked near the lobby entrance. The motel was small, 10 rooms total. It was at least 100 years old and looked like something straight out of a horror film. The green paint on the outside was nearly faded completely, pieces of the roof were starting to fall off or become loose, and the landscaping was overgrown. There was a lone truck parked near the lobby. I nearly slipped on the wet gravel as I ran up to the lobby door. A bell dinged signaling my entrance. I was immediately greeted by the gravelly voice of the motel clerk. The clerk was a heavy-set man in his 50s. He had greasy skin with short black hair and was blind in one eye. He checked me into the motel, sliding a room key with the number 8 imprinted on the tag. The room was ugly. It had red wallpaper that was aged and starting to peel off, the carpeted floor was littered with stains and cigarette burns, and the bedsheets looked like something out of an 80s magazine. I didn't really give a shit though. It was only for the night, and I was really exhausted. I plopped down on the bed, lying on top of the comforter. It didn't take long for me to doze off into a deep sleep. A loud bang outside my room woke me up. I sat up quickly, slightly panicked. Bang! I heard it again. This time, I went to inspect the noise by peeking out of the room's window which faced the street. I drew the curtain back just enough to glance outside. The storm had passed by this point. There were no signs of anybody out there. I retreated back to bed and laid down. It took a few moments this time, but I was able to fall back asleep. A woman's voice whispered help me into my ear and woke me up. Her breath was cold as a winter wind in my ear. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I looked around the room. There was nobody else there. It was only me in the room. This time I walked over to a little desk chair in the corner and sat down. I leaned back into the chair, slouching my position in an attempt to sleep. It was impossible to fall back asleep. Behind me, there's a scratching noise that comes from inside the wall. I had put my ear up to it to listen. It started becoming progressively louder and heavier. It sounded like whoever it was about to claw their way through the red wallpaper. This had pushed me over the edge. I jumped up from the chair and moved as quickly as I could to exit the room. I marched to the lobby to check out and get a refund, but the clerk was gone. I called out for him a few times, but he didn't answer. Where could he have gone? I didn't want to leave without getting my money back first. So I stayed. I rang the service bell at least a dozen times. There was still no answer from the clerk. He was gone, and so was his truck. I noticed the desk was covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs that wasn't there before. I exited the lobby. The motel sign wasn't standing like it was prior. It had fallen forward and the letters were broken in half, lying on the ground, dark and lifeless. The motel was completely abandoned. There was no blind front desk agent or glowing motel sign. This had to be some sort of sick prank. That's what it was, a cruel joke. I could prove it. I pulled out my wallet and the cash I paid the clerk with was still in my wallet. A sinking feeling filled the pit of my stomach. My throat became tight and the air was thinning by the second. My wallet fell to the ground. The last thing I remember was seeing the silhouette of the clerk approach me, and then I woke up in my car at a rest stop. I had woken up right before his hand touched me. I went to the restroom to splash water on my face before leaving the rest stop. I sped down the highway, determined not to stop anymore. I passed a flashing neon sign that read Motel in big bright letters. That dull humming noise that a neon sign makes has haunted every dream I've had since. Story 3. When I applied for a job at 257 Motel, I didn't think much about it. It was just another regular job. The motel needed staff for the night shift, and they were paying a nice little sum of money which I desperately needed. Since I got kicked out of the house, I worked at way worse workplaces in order to survive. When I came for interview, I didn't find anything odd. The motel was clean and peaceful and the manager was nice. I got the job. I will be working at reception from 23 to 7 o'clock starting from tomorrow. My job was to greet everyone with a smile and give them the key to the room. Simple enough. Next day, I came to the motel about half an hour before my shift. The manager greeted me and gave me some basic info. Before he left me for the shift, he turned around and said this, just one more thing. If any guests come during the 25th hour, you have to follow some advice on the list in your drawer. I thought they were just messing with me. After all, how could guests come during the 25th hour? I mean it. He said in a serious tone and left. After that, boredom soon hit. There weren't many guests. I checked in one truck driver and one young couple during the whole night. I mainly just sat in the lobby and scrolled through Reddit on my phone. Night was peaceful, and the morning came soon with the sun rising at 6. When the manager came in the morning, he was satisfied when he heard that there were no problems during my shift. I thought this was the best job I have had in a while. The following day, I went to work again. While waiting for my shift to start, I chatted a bit with the manager. He was a nice guy and I enjoyed talking to him because we had some similar interests. But in the middle of our conversation he asked me if I had read the paper that was in the drawer. I didn't want to do it, but he urged me to read it the moment my shift starts. We chatted for a bit more before my shift began. No one came in, so I thought I could finally read the list. I took the paper from the drawer and started reading. This is a transcript of the original paper with some of my thoughts. Guide for 25th hour in the motel. Okay, this must be some kind of prank. When our clock in the lobby strikes 13 times, IT signalizes the start of the special 25th hour, one more hour of work for you, but if you successfully finish it, you get bonus of $1,000. Okay, now I'm interested. If any guests come during this time, kindly welcome them and take them to their room. There are few exceptions to this rule. 1 Guests that wear outfits from 1800s. They are mostly harmless, avoid eye contact and be polite with them. They will be grateful for the room. Okay, this is some kind of joke. 2 Guests that claim that they come from a non-existing country. Follow the same protocol as with number 1. 3 Guests that look injured. They might seem like injured people, but they aren't. Insist that they can't stay and should go see a doctor. They will leave quickly. For guests that came for business meeting, welcome them to the motel and tell them that there are no available rooms. They could yell a bit, but are mostly harmless. 5 Guests that stands in the lobby and stares at you. This one rarely happens, but is most dangerous. If this happens, take the gun from under the desk and aim for the head. It should do the trick. 6 Any other guests. They shouldn't come at this time. If they do come, call your manager on this number. For the safety of the hotel, please follow the rules. Okay, this is some kind of twisted prank. I finished reading and put the paper back in the drawer. But hey, at least I had something to think about while waiting. The next hour went by as usual. I was playing a game on my phone when I noticed something. The clock in the lobby struck 13 times. This shouldn't have been possible, but I thought that someone was playing a prank on me. But when I looked back at my phone, I froze. The clock on my phone worked as always, but it was showing 25:01. I felt panic taking over me, but I forced myself to remain calm. Finally, whatever this was, I wanted to stay collected. I sat there and waited. The air was suddenly cold and there was some kind of eerie feeling taking over the building. I turned on my phone and started playing a game to calm myself. As I sat there in silence, I realized that nothing was happening. When I got up to grab a bag of chips from the vending machine in the lobby, I felt chills running up my body. I slowly turned to the door. There was a person entering the motel. He looked normal, so I hurried to my desk to welcome them. He was a polite guy in his 30s. When I asked him where he was from, he casually told me that he was from a country that I had never heard of. When I typed it on the computer, standard check-in process, I suddenly remembered something. While he was standing there, I slowly turned my head away. I calmly told him to wait for a second. There is nothing to worry about. I probably just don't know this country exists. I tried to calm myself while Googling the country. No result. Not the slightest mention of the country. I handed the guy the key and took him to the room while keeping his head so low that I looked at my shoes the entire time. When he entered the room, I felt relieved. The whole experience wasn't so scary. It was rather shocking to find out that this was real. The 25th hour ended soon and the rest of the night went by normally. In the morning, I told my manager everything and I got my bonus. The strange guy also gave me a nice tip. I decided to keep working because the pay was good and night visitors seemed to be harmless. Everything went smoothly for the next few weeks, until one night, a guy started staring at me. I had just sent a guy with a broken arm away when I felt someone was looking at me. I turned around to see a man wearing a business suit staring directly at me. I remembered what I had to do because there was a man staring at me during the 25th hour. I slowly reached for the gun under my desk. I took the pistol and aimed at the stranger. The scariest thing was that he didn't seem to be bothered by the gun. He just stood there staring at me with his. Wait. The guy had no eyes. I was never so scared in my entire life. I felt chills all over my body and my hands started to sweat. I pulled the trigger. I don't think that I will ever forget what happened next. The guy simply just turned around and walked out with a bullet hole in his head. At that moment, I decided that if I would make it out of this night alive, I would quit for the first time in the morning. Whatever I was welcoming during that time definitely wasn't human. I didn't know whether they were ghosts or zombies or something even worse, but I wasn't planning on finding out. I fortified myself in the break room and waited for the sunrise. I somehow survived. When my manager came in the morning, he didn't have to ask what happened. I collected my bonus and left. I haven't thought about this place ever since, until this night. I was traveling and I stopped at a motel. I was feeling very tired and I just went to the room. I had an uneasy feeling that this motel looked familiar, but I didn't think much about it. I was woken in the middle of the night by a gunshot and a scream. I immediately locked my door and put a desk against it. I was about to call reception when I saw something terrifying. The clock on my phone showed that it was 25:18. That was the reason that motel seemed familiar to me. It was the motel that I used to work at. My thought process was interrupted by a loud bang on the door in the hallway. Something is there, and I think that I might know what it is. Whatever happened there, it isn't looking good. Currently, it's 25:48. The thing has not stopped banging on the doors. I heard a few screams in the last half an hour. I still have to hide in my room for 12 minutes. But who knows, maybe it somehow broke in our world. I just hope that I will make it out alive. Story 4. This story is a real story and I know it sounds fake, but it's real. I was driving on a lonely highway, trying to make it to another state for a business meeting. The sun had set and the road was quiet. My GPS system was giving me confusing directions, but I didn't want to stop to ask for help. I was in a rush and didn't want to arrive late. Suddenly, my car started making strange noises and I noticed the check engine light was flashing. I knew I had to stop and check what was going on. I pulled off onto the next exit and found myself in a small town that I had never heard of before. I saw a motel on the edge of town and decided to try to get some rest before figuring out what to do about my car in the morning. As I walked into the motel lobby, a shiver ran down my spine. There was no one in sight except for the receptionist, an old woman who was staring at me with a cold expression. I tried to shake off the feeling and asked for a room for the night. She handed me the key to room 13, which was at the end of a long, narrow corridor. The room was small and smelled musty. The walls were thin and I could hear the creaking of the floorboards in the room above me. The bed was old and the sheets were rough, but I was too tired to care. I lay down and tried to get some sleep, but I kept hearing strange noises coming from outside the room. I got up and looked out of the window, but the night was dark and I couldn't see anything. As I was about to get back into bed, I noticed a small piece of paper that had fallen onto the floor. I picked it up and read the message, "Get out now." My heart started racing and I felt my hands shake. Was someone trying to scare me? Was there someone in the motel who wanted to harm me? I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to get out of there. I got dressed and started to pack my bags, but I realized that I had left my phone charger in the car. I decided to go and get it, but when I stepped out of my room, I saw that the corridor was empty. The receptionist was nowhere to be seen. As I walked towards the front door, I heard footsteps coming from the hallway. I turned around and saw the receptionist walking towards me, her eyes cold and her expression twisted into a sneer. I froze, unsure of what to do. "Are you leaving?" she asked, her voice low and menacing. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. "Yes," I finally managed to say. The receptionist stared at me for a few seconds, then turned around and walked back towards the lobby. I waited for a few seconds, then ran towards the door, my heart pounding in my chest. As I stepped outside, I heard the sound of a car engine coming from behind the motel. I turned around and saw a car driving away. It was the same car that had been following me since I had left the highway. I started to run, my heart racing and my mind full of fear. I knew I had to get away as fast as possible. I didn't stop running until I had found a gas station, where I called the police. The rest of the night was a blur. The police searched the motel and found no one. They said it was possible that the receptionist had been involved in a string of robberies and that she had been trying to scare me away. As for me, I was traumatized by the experience. I never want to stay in a deserted motel again. And I'm glad I trusted my instincts and got out before anything bad happened to.